The last thing I remember is the light, not a gentle, beckoning light. It was a brutal, twin-headed monster of a light roaring towards us out of the rain-slicked dark. Then came the sound. A sound you don't just hear, you feel it in your teeth, in your bones, the universe-ending shriek of metal tearing itself apart. I remember turning to Ingrid, her name a half-formed prayer on my lips. Her eyes were wide, her hand was reaching for mine, and then nothing. A deep, silent velvet black. When I woke up, the black had been replaced by a blinding, antiseptic white. The air smelled clean, too clean, like lemons and bleach. A persistent, low hum vibrated through the mattress under me. My body felt distant, like a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit. A man in a crisp white coat stood by the window, his silhouette dark against the pale light. "Lars," he said, his voice calm and smooth, like pebbles in a stream. "Welcome back." "I'm Dr. Aris." I tried to speak, but my throat was a desert. A croak was all I managed. He was by my side in an instant, a glass of water with a straw at my lips. I drank. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. "Ingrid," I rasped, the name scraping its way out. The memory, the light, the sound, it all crashed back in. "The crash is she?" The question died in my throat. I couldn't ask it, I couldn't know. The guilt was already a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I was the one driving. I survived. She couldn't have. It's not fair. Dr. Aris put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Lars, the accident was a long time ago. You've been in a coma. It's been 5 years." 5 years, the words didn't make sense. They were just sounds. 5 years, my mind reeled, trying to grasp the sheer, impossible weight of that lost time. But then he said the thing that broke my brain. "Your wife, Ingrid, she's been a rock. She's been here by your side almost every single day. She never gave up hope." The room tilted. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. Ingrid, alive, the guilt that had been suffocating me was suddenly replaced by a dizzying, terrifying hope. A moment later, the door opened and she walked in. It was her. Oh God, it was her. Older, yes. There were lines around her eyes I didn't recognize, and her hair had threads of gray at the temples. She looked tired, worn down to the bone. But it was Ingrid's face, Ingrid's smile. She rushed to my side, her hands fluttering over my face, my arms. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Lars, oh Lars, you're back. You're finally back." I started crying too, a raw, ugly sound. I was a ghost and I'd come back to life. But as she held my hand, a strange, cold thought wormed its way through the fog of my relief. Her hands, they felt different, drier, and her touch, it felt practiced, rehearsed. Like an actress playing a part she'd played 1,000 times. I tried to push the feeling away, blaming it on the coma, the drugs, the sheer trauma of it all. Of course things felt different. I was different. The world had spun on for 5 years without me. I was the one who was out of sync. In the days that followed, I settled into a strange new reality. Dr. Aris would visit every morning, checking my vitals, asking me questions about my memory. And Ingrid was my constant companion. She would sit for hours, patiently filling in the 5-year gap. She told me about her new job at a small accounting firm, about my nephew, Oscar, who was now in high school, about the friends who had moved away. She'd bring me food, carefully spoon-feeding me the bland, pureed meals. But the more she talked, the more the cold feeling grew. It was in the details, the little things. "Remember that little Italian place we loved by the old cinema?" she asked one afternoon, her voice bright with forced nostalgia. "The one with the checkered tablecloths. I went there last week for my birthday. It just wasn't the same without you." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. We'd never been to an Italian place by a cinema. Our spot was a tiny, noisy Greek taverna on the other side of town. I knew it as well as I knew my own name. I closed my eyes, telling myself it was the brain damage. Post-traumatic confabulation, Dr. Aris had called it. My brain was just making things up to fill the holes. Then she'd show me pictures on her phone. "This is us in Santorini, 2018, she'd say, pointing to a photo of two people who looked vaguely like us, squinting in bright sunshine. The man had my hair, but his smile was wider, emptier. The woman wore a dress Ingrid would never have chosen. I'd stare at the image until my eyes burned, trying to force a memory that wasn't there. The room itself started to feel like a cage. It was a perfect, sterile box. The single window looked out onto a serene, manicured garden with a large oak tree. But the leaves on the oak tree never rustled. No birds ever landed on its branches. The clouds in the sky never moved. It was a painting, a high-resolution photograph pasted onto the world. I never saw another soul besides Ingrid and Dr. Aris. No nurses, no orderlies, no other patients coughing in the next room. When I asked where everyone was, Dr. Aris just smiled that placid smile. "This is a private wing, Lars. We want to minimize any potential for infection while you recover. You're very important to us." The food was another thing. Everything tasted the same. Whether it was supposed to be chicken soup or apple puree, it all had the same underlying, vaguely chemical taste and the same soft, pulpy texture. It was sustenance, but it wasn't food. It was fuel for a machine, and I was the machine. I was enduring it all. I was playing the part of the grateful, recovering husband. But inside, an alarm bell was screaming, a high, piercing shriek that never, ever stopped. This wasn't my life. This wasn't my wife. This wasn't real. One night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the room was deafening, broken only by the low hum of whatever machinery was keeping this diorama running. My hand, fumbling in the bedside table drawer for a glass of water I knew wasn't there, brushed against something hard and smooth. It was a tablet. An old, forgotten model, thin and cool to the touch. It must have been left there by mistake. My heart hammered. This was something that didn't belong, a crack in the perfect facade. With trembling fingers, I pressed the power button. It flickered to life, the battery icon showing a miraculous 15%. And then the symbol I'd been dreaming of. A Wi-Fi icon connected to an unsecured network named Guest Access. It was a lifeline, a whisper from the outside world. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I didn't dare search for my own name or Ingrid's. I didn't want to know, not yet. Instead, I went to the one place I could think of where you could scream into the void and someone might just scream back. A forum, a random, anonymous message board for people with medical anxieties. I created a new account, Ghost in the Room, and I started to write. Title, Woke Up from a Long Coma. Does anyone else feel like the world is fake? I don't know if this is the right place for this. My doctor says I have brain damage and my memories are scrambled, but this feels different. I was in an accident 5 years ago. I woke up a few weeks ago and they told me my wife has been waiting for me this whole time, but she's wrong. Not her, but the details she gives. She talks about vacations we never took, friends I've never met. The room I'm in is perfect, too perfect. The view outside the window never changes. I never see anyone else. I feel like I'm going crazy. I should be grateful I'm alive. My wife is alive. But every time she touches me, it feels like a lie. Every word she says sounds like a line from a script. Am I just a broken, ungrateful man, or has anyone else ever experienced this? This feeling of being an actor in a play about your own life. I just need to know I'm not the only one. I didn't expect a reply. I didn't even know if the post went through before the battery died. I slid the tablet back into the drawer and lay there, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the silence. Just typing it out, just giving form to the formless dread, made it feel more real. The next morning, I managed to steal a few minutes with the tablet while Ingrid was supposedly fetching my breakfast. The battery was at 3, my post had a dozen replies. Dude, sounds like Capgras delusion, look it up. Your brain is telling you your loved ones are imposters. Could be a side effect of the meds they have you on. Ask your doctor for a full list. This is terrifying, I have no advice, but I'm listening. The replies were a mix of clinical diagnoses and simple sympathy. Capgras delusion. I clung to the term. It was a name for my horror, a neat little box to put my terror in. Maybe that's all it was, a glitch in my own broken brain. For a few hours, the thought brought a strange comfort. It meant Ingrid was real. It meant I was the problem. I could fix myself. Fueled by this desperate hope, I decided to test it. I would test myself. Later that day, while reaching for the water pitcher Ingrid had left on the table, I accidentally overbalanced and tumbled out of the bed onto the floor. It was a clumsy, pathetic fall, but it was the most real thing I'd done in weeks. I lay on the soft carpet, feigning a groan of pain, and watched them. Dr. Eris and Ingrid rushed in. Their faces were masks of alarm, but their movements were off, delayed, like actors who missed their cue by half a second. They helped me up, their words of concern a flurry of overlapping, meaningless sounds. There was no genuine panic in their eyes, only a kind of stressed-out annoyance. The performance was slipping. The real crack in the wall, however, came from the most unexpected source. A few days later, a new face appeared. A young man, barely out of his teens, wearing a janitor's uniform that was too big for him. He looked nervous, constantly fidgeting with the handle of his cleaning cart. Dr. Eris introduced him as Finn, the new maintenance hire. He was told not to speak to me, to just do his work and leave. He was wiping down the window with the painted-on sky when I saw my chance. Ingrid and Dr. Eris were out of the room. It was just me and him. Hey, I said, my voice quiet. Finn jumped, startled. He looked at me, then at the door, his eyes wide with fear. It's okay, I said, trying to sound as non-threatening as possible. I just have a question. What's the weather like out there today? It was a simple, stupid question. But Finn's reaction was anything but simple. He froze. His eyes darted around the room, not looking at me, but upwards towards the top corner of the ceiling where I'd never noticed a tiny, dark dome before. A camera, his mouth opened and closed silently. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, a placid, rehearsed calm settled over his features. "It's a beautiful day," he said, his voice a monotone, parroting the exact words Ingrid had used that morning. "Clear skies, a perfect day." But as he spoke, I heard it, a sound so faint, so out of place in this sterile world that it might as well have been a gunshot. Tap, 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 tap. The sound of rain, real rain, hitting the other side of the glass. I looked at Finn. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just stared at the unchanging, sunny vista on the window, while the sound of the storm outside whispered the truth. It was the first undeniable piece of evidence. The world they had built for me was leaking. That single, impossible sound, the rain, changed everything. The fog of confusion and self-doubt that had crippled me for weeks burned away, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't sick. I wasn't crazy. I was a prisoner. The haunted survivor in my head died, and in his place a detective was born. My mission was no longer to heal, but to escape. I became the model patient. I ate the tasteless food without complaint. I smiled when Ingrid told me stories. I nodded along to Dr. Eris's condescending explanations of my confabulations. I was obedient, passive, and broken, everything they wanted me to be. But at night, when the humming silence descended, I was a different person. My first excursion was terrifying. I waited until the digital clock on the wall read 3 a.m. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the floor. The door to my room wasn't locked. I never even thought to check. The realization sent a chill down my spine. They hadn't needed a lock. They had my mind in a cage, which was far more effective. The hallway outside was just as I'd imagined. A single, sterile corridor with a few other doors, all of them unmarked. It felt less like a hospital wing and more like a movie set that had been left up after filming. At the end of the hall was a door marked utility. I tried the handle, locked, of course. But next to it was a small ventilation grate near the floor, held in place by 4 simple screws. Using the edge of the forgotten tablet from my drawer as a makeshift screwdriver, I worked them loose, my fingers clumsy, my breath held tight in my chest. I squeezed through the opening into a cramped, dusty space behind the walls. It was a tangle of wires and ducts. Following the thickest bundle of cables, I crawled through the darkness until I saw a sliver of light. It came from a room at the very end of the set. Peering through a gap in the drywall, I saw it. The control room. It was a small, cluttered office. Dr. Eris was there, out of his white coat, slumped in a chair with a cup of coffee. And sitting across from him, laughing at something he'd said, was Ingrid. But it wasn't Ingrid. She had taken off her wig, revealing short, dark hair. The tired lines on her face were gone, wiped away with makeup remover. She looked 10 years younger, vibrant and alive in a way the woman who visited my bed never was. They weren't doctor and grieving wife. They were colleagues at the end of a long shift. My blood ran cold. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to bite down on my hand to keep from crying out. I scanned the rest of the room. On a large monitor, I could see a live feed from the camera in my room, a shot of my empty, rumpled bed. On a desk, amidst scattered papers and coffee cups, was a thick binder. The title on the spine was printed in stark black letters. I could just make it out in the dim light. It didn't say Lars Hansen Medical File. It said Project Lazarus. A study in simulated intervention for prolonged traumatic grief. The world fell away. The last 5 years of my guilt, the ghost of my wife I'd been mourning, it was all a lie. I wasn't a patient, I was the experiment. And Ingrid, my real Ingrid, the one whose hand I tried to hold in the final second, she was really gone. She had died in that crash 5 years ago, and these ghouls had spent every day since then desecrating her memory. I crawled back through the darkness, my body moving on pure, unadulterated rage. The grief I felt was no longer for my lost years, but for the desecration of my love. They had taken the most sacred thing I had, the memory of my wife, and turned it into a prop in their sick little play. When I slipped back into my room, I wasn't a detective anymore. I was an executioner, but a physical confrontation was pointless. I was weak and they had control. My revenge had to be surgical. I had to dismantle their reality just as they had dismantled mine. The next morning, when the actress playing my wife walked in, I gave her my most broken, hopeful smile. I let her fuss over me, let her feed me the bland paste she called breakfast. I waited. "Ingrid," I said, my voice deliberately soft and wistful. "I had the most wonderful dream last night." She leaned in, her face a mask of caring concern. "Oh, what was it about, my love?" "I dreamt we were back in Santorini," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "That trip in 2018. I remembered the little white church with the blue roof and the taste of the wine we drank watching the sunset. It was so real. It's the first clear memory I've had." "Thank you for helping me remember." I watched the color drain from her face. It was a fake memory she and Dr. Aris had planted, one of their many clumsy attempts to build a shared history. By remembering it with such clarity, I was showing my hand. I was telling them I knew. She stammered something about being happy for me and practically fled the room. A few minutes later, she returned with Dr. Aris. His usual calm, professional demeanor was gone. He looked rattled. They stood together at the foot of my bed, a united front of liars. Lars, Dr. Aris began, his voice tight. Anya, that is, Ingrid tells me you're having some vivid recollections. I just smiled. Anya, that's a lovely name. Is that her real name? The game was over. The silence in the room was electric. Anya, the actress, looked at the floor, a flicker of genuine shame on her face. Dr. Aris, however, seemed to deflate. The scientist, the puppet master, was gone. All that was left was a tired, defeated man. This was a mistake, he said, more to himself than to me. He confessed everything. It was a radical, unsanctioned, and highly illegal psychological study. They had acquired me from a long-term care facility where I'd been warehoused and forgotten, a John Doe from a fatal accident. Their hypothesis was that they could build a new reality around a traumatized mind, guiding it towards healing by providing a better outcome. A world where Ingrid had lived. We wanted to cure you, he said, the words hollow and pathetic. A cold, pure anger unlike anything I had ever felt washed over me. Cure me, I whispered, the words dripping with venom. You tortured me, you made me feel guilty for surviving. You made me believe my wife was alive, only to kill her again every single day with your lies. You're not scientists. You're grave robbers. My words hung in the air, heavy and sharp as broken glass. The experiment, and with it my 5-year lie, was over. There were phone calls, hushed and frantic. Men in suits who were not doctors arrived. They spoke to me with a detached, legalistic concern. I was a problem to be managed, a lawsuit waiting to happen. They released me. It wasn't a discharge from a hospital. It was like being let out of the back of an unmarked van. One day I was in the sterile white room. The next I was standing on a city street with a check for an obscene amount of money in my pocket and the address of a new apartment. I was free, but I have never felt more imprisoned. I walked through the real world, a world of unpredictable weather, of crowds and noise and a million different smells, and it all felt fake. The simulation was over, but my mind was still running the software. Every stranger's smile felt rehearsed. Every kindness felt like a manipulation. The vibrant, chaotic tapestry of life seemed like a more complex, better-funded version of the set I'd just left. I found my way to my new apartment. It was clean, furnished, and completely anonymous. In the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. It was my face, but 5 years older. My hair was thinner, my face gaunt, my eyes haunted by things they'd never really seen. I had mourned a woman who was a ghost, been cared for by a woman who was a lie, and now I was a man who didn't exist. The real Lars Hansen died in that car. I was just the Lazarus Project's final, horrifying data point. The cost of their truth was my sanity. Final update, it's over, I'm out. For those of you who followed my first post, it wasn't Capgras, it wasn't the meds, it was real. Or rather, it was a real, tangible lie. A sick, twisted psychological experiment. The woman I thought was my wife was an actress. The hospital was a set. My real wife, Ingrid, died in the crash just like I first remembered. I'm supposed to be free now. They gave me money, a new life. But I have to ask myself, as I sit here in this new, strange apartment, how do I know this isn't just another set?